This is News Night, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pio Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, holding closed-door meetings and turnover ceremonies while answering questions about a birthday party at the palace. We give you a look at the first work week of the Marcos administration. Research experts project COVID-19 cases in Metro Manila may reach 1,000 to 2,000 daily in a week or two. And fans celebrate as Nayeon makes history as the first K-pop soloist to have her album enter the top 10 of Billboard 200. All eyes on President Bongbong Marcos as his first 100 days in office continues to unfold. Today marks the first work week of the new administration, yet some key cabinet posts remain unfilled. Our Rex Ramita joins us from Malacanang. Rex, how did the president work on his first Monday?
Well, President Bongbong Marcos presided over a closed-door meeting of the Agriculture Department's Executive Committee. They talk about the department's plans and programs, as well as the food outlook and production in the following weeks. We understand that food security is one of President Marcos's main concern. The chief executive earlier warned of a possible severe problem in food supply for the rest of the year. That's why the gravity of the situation compelled him to take over as Agri-Chief for now, he earlier said. Before that, he attended his first flag ceremony in Malacanang this morning. He also shook hands and took pictures with palace employees. Joining him for his two events this morning are Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez and Presidential Management Staff Chief Naida Angping. President Marcos told them he's very happy with the warm reception and that they should just keep up the good work. This afternoon, meanwhile, he led the Presidential Security Group's change of command ceremony. Former Armed Forces spokesperson Colonel Ramon Zagala took over as the new PSG commander. The PSG is in charge of providing close-in security to the president and the first family. Zagala concurrently holds the position as acting military assistant to the president. President Marcos, meanwhile, has yet to complete his cabinet as his administration goes into action. They also have yet to hold their first cabinet meeting. We have yet to know when it will take place.
Wala po sa binibigay sa amin na sinasabi nilang deadline. Ang sinasabi is masuri talaga ang pag-evaluate nila dito sa mga kandidato para sa mga posisyon. I understand that this is now going through the final evaluation stage. So, I don't think it will take too long.
Press Secretary Trixie Angeles also says they understand how important the positions are and that they're already on the final evaluation stage, which she adds will not take too long. In the meantime, Angeles says that those who are next in command to the Secretary will serve as officers in charge for these departments. Back to you, Pia.
Rex, any word from the press secretary on the president's mother, Imelda Marcos' 93rd birthday inside the palace?
Well, Angeles was asked if they can assure that they will not use public funds regarding these private parties. And Angeles responded that they are assuring that the president will follow the law and that the president has not done anything in excess of what's written in law. Pia.
Rex and Ramita there reporting live from Malacanang. Well, Senator Amy Marcos also defending her mother's birthday celebration, calling it a simple get-together with family members and old friends. Again, here's a look at other portfolios yet to be filled. President Marcos has yet to appoint secretaries for the Departments of Energy, Health, Environment, Human Settlements, and Science and Technology, as well as the Commission on Higher Education chairman. While there are agencies without appointed secretaries, other departments are buckling down to work. First, at the Education Department, Vice President and Secretary Sara Duterte thanked her predecessor, Leonor Briones, in a ceremonial turnover. She told stakeholders that she will continue to look into possible areas of improvement in the basic education sector.
I will also take the task with a reminder that we shall continue to find ways to improve basic education in terms of access, equity, quality, resiliency, and governance, to produce learners who can achieve their full potential.
Earlier in the day, Duterte also met with representatives from private education associations. She says the department will provide private schools the assistance they need. A number of private schools have struggled to continue operations since 2020 as thousands of students migrate to public schools amid an economic downturn. Now on to the Interior Department. Secretary Benher Abalos vows to sustain gains from the Duterte administration's war against drugs. Abalos says that under his term, the fight against illegal drugs will be more focused on building up strong cases against suspects. Abalos explains an illegal drug suspect is often not prosecuted because of technicalities in the chain of custody of evidence. Under the law, the initial custody and control of the dangerous drugs confiscated must be witnessed by an elected public official, a representative from the media, or a representative from the National Prosecution Service. But most of the time, Abalos says there is no witness from the media or the Fiscal's office, causing the case to be dismissed.
We will try our best. We will really do our best here. Siguro I will give emphasis aside from the police, no? Yung sinasabi ko kanina. We will make sure that airtight ang kaso. Kasi maski manghuli ka na manghuli, pero kung karamihan dismissed, baliwala ito. No? So, kailangan siguro, hindi lang ang mga pulis ang malinis eh. Yung iba dapat ma-check din eh.
Abalos says he will also work closely with Justice Secretary Boying Remulla on the matter. Well, meanwhile, the Interior Department will also return unused COVID-19 funds amounting to 577 million pesos to the Treasury Bureau. The funds were intended for the hiring of contact tracers and the purchase of health-related products like alcohol and face masks. Abalos explains the amount was not fully utilized because local governments hired their own contact tracers and provided shuttle services for personnel. The Commission on Audit earlier flagged the DILG for failing to make use of its 4 billion peso COVID-19 budget for 2021 with 577 million in unused funds. Abalos says that while the unused funds did not happen during his term, he will have that checked and investigated further. Justice Secretary Boying Remulla identifying 3 attached agencies which he will focus on. These are the Land Registration Authority, or LRA, and the Immigration and Correction Bureaus. Remulla says a syndicate is running the system at the LRA. He adds extortion, human trafficking, and protection syndicates are plaguing the Immigration Bureau. And Remulla says activities that ruin society persist at the Bucor. Just recently, the National Bureau of Investigation filed criminal complaints against police officers who were tagged in the questionable deaths of high-profile inmates at the New Bilibid prison.
The Department of Justice is there to give justice to every man, woman, and child, no matter the circumstance of birth, no matter the economic standing. We will give them all our sense of justice.
Let's make a correction. Hindi dapat police officers yan eh. We're talking about the NBP. Remulla says he plans to stay as Justice Secretary for the entire Marcos administration. More stories ahead. How are other government agencies kicking off the first Monday of the Marcos administration, and some relief for motorists as fuel prices drop? You're watching Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
The universe was the ultimate, but there's more. Dahil tinawag ko ako ng Panginoon for a major purpose. To guide the youth, help communities, and to bring others closer to Him. Kaya I I take care of my health through proper diet, exercise, and MX3 capsule. I am ready to serve. Kasi para sa Panginoon, hindi lang ako fourth runner-up. First place ako sa puso niya.
Mahalagang paalala, ang MX3 capsule ay hindi gamot at hindi dapat gamitin panggamot sa anumang uri ng sakit.
Fried chicken? Timplang happy! With easy-to-cook Magnolia Chicken Timplados. Iba't ibang sarap ng chicken, kaya. Anong Magnolia Chicken Timplados mo? Iba't ibang easy chicken sarap.
For us to be able to move forward, infrastructure development should be a focus of any economic development program in the country in the next few years.
The objective is to improve transportation, mobility, and accessibility in our cities by seamlessly connecting or linking up all our road and rail networks, airports, and seaports. With this, we can decongest Metro Manila, accelerate and make more efficient the transportation of people and goods, improve access between cities and provinces, develop new economic growth centers, boost our local industries, enable tourism, create more jobs and business and livelihood opportunities, and allow everyone to have a better quality of life.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. COVID-19 infections in Metro Manila may peak in 1 to 2 weeks' time. The Octa Research Group projects cases in the capital region to reach 1 to 2,000 daily. But Octa points out the increase in the positivity rate has slowed down and healthcare use is still below 50%, which means there is no need to raise the alert level yet.
These are just projections. Pwedeng magbago itong mga to. Tumaas siya from 6 to 8%, 6% to 8.3%. Hindi na ito napakalaki. That's why we think na baka mag-peak na soon sa NCR kasi medyo bumabagal na yung pagtaas ng positivity rate.
Octa also notes the significant increase in the positivity rates in Benguet Province, Calabar Zone, Central Luzon, and Western Visayas. The country saw almost 7,400 new cases from June 27 to July 3. Health workers also warning about the alarming increase in dengue cases. Figures show over 51,600 infections reported from January to June 18th, 58% higher than those tallied in the same period last year.
Dapat tayong maalarma. Sa Singapore, mas madami ang namatay sa dengue rather than COVID. Dapat po tayo mabahala kung ating mga anak o kahit po matanda, kahit po nurse, kahit sino po ay pwede mag-dengue sa panahon ngayon kasi tag-ulan po. At saka lagi po natin tandaan na wala pong pinipili ang dengue sa edad. Kahit po 6 months lang.
The Philippine Medical Association says it is awaiting the appointment of the next health chief, citing the urgent need to address health issues, including COVID-19 and seasonal diseases. A bit of relief for motorists after weeks of oil price hikes. Beginning tomorrow, fuel companies will slash diesel prices by 3 pesos per liter. Kerosene used in many households will have an even bigger rollback at 3 pesos and 40 centavos per liter. While the cost of gasoline will stay the same, recent numbers from the Energy Department show fuel prices have risen to up to 99 pesos as of end June. With costly prices at the pump, Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista says the biggest problem for his department is land transport. George Cahila spoke to the News Secretary about his plans and priorities.
This long line of passengers of EDSA Carousel welcomed the first Monday of the new administration. The free MRT ride ended on Thursday, which is why commuters endured the long waiting time under the heat, just to save some of their hard-earned money.
At least nakakabawas ng budget. At saka, yun nga lang, pila lang, kasi marami rin. Tiis lang kami, pila, pero okay siya. Nakakabawas sa budget, lalo na sa mga taong maliit lang ang sahod.
Maganda siya, makakatulong para sa amin, lalo na sa aming mga commuters, makakatipid. Yung gastos na pamasahe para na rin namin nagagastos na allowance pa rin namin.
New Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista says this situation is unacceptable. Hence, the agency will focus its efforts in solving land transportation problems.
I don't think the status quo is acceptable to the President. Nung pinag-uusapan namin ang mga problema, sabi ng Presidente, ayusin natin kaagad ang problema.
Bautista lauds a program of the past administration like the libreng sakay and fuel subsidy for drivers and operators. But seems like it's not enough.
Even marami silang ginawa ay talagang hindi na-resolve lahat ng problema, no?
The Secretary met with the new Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board Chairperson Cheloy Garafil to discuss possible solutions to the problem. While there is no specific details yet on their plans to resolve the problems, especially with soaring oil prices, the department must new programs for the land transport sector.
We will strive to get that balance. Kasi sabi ko nga, kaya kailangan open ang communication sa lahat ng aspeto. We will study that, we will listen to all stakeholders and come up with a win-win solution.
Earlier, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. approved the extension of the Libreng Sakay program for the EDSA carousel until December and free train rides for students from August 22 to November 4. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The economic team is aiming to cut the poverty rate to single-digit levels by 2028. Chief Economic Planner Arsenio Barisacan made that pronouncement as he took over the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, today. Barisacan says he wants to steer the economy back to pre-pandemic levels to a consistent growth trajectory of over 6%. This is the second time for Barisacan to lead NEDA. The first was during the term of the late former President Aquino III.
Recognize such a target is ambitious, but I firmly believe it is achievable. I was fully aware that the challenges before me were far more complex than the last time I was at NEDA's helm. I am happy to share that the President and the economic team are in substantial agreement on the overall goal of the new administration. We all agree to quickly revive job creation and poverty reduction by steering the economy back to the high growth path while addressing government debt and the sharply rising prices of food and essential commodities.
Barisacan wants to push for economic liberalization reforms such as amendments to the Public Service, Retail, Trade, Liberalization and Foreign Investment Acts. Former Solicitor General Jose Calida assumes his post as chairman of the Audit Commission. Calida vows to keep a close watch on agencies to crack down on corruption. He had this to say on whether the COA will continue publishing audit reports on its website.
This is my first day, Give me some more days. I will tell you what you want to do. Magaling yung mga empleyado, so wala akong problema sa kanila. Babantayan talaga namin, di ba? Kasi sa Supreme Court nga lang, panalo na kami palagi. Kaya manalo pa rin kami.
There was no formal turnover ceremony at COA since it has no sitting chairman. The Commission on Appointments did not confirm the last appointee for the post, Davao accountant Rizalina Hustol, which allowed President Marcos to pick Calida as the new COA chief. COA once flagged millions of pesos in allowances for Calida when he was Solicitor General. Lawmakers still pushing for the creation of a special economic zone near the upcoming Bulacan airport. This after President Marcos pointed out defects in the measure he vetoed. Senator Amy Marcos, however, says her brother may not have had the chance to carefully study the bill. CNR Kanghel reports lawmakers say they're willing to work with Malacanang to iron out a better proposal.
Senator Joel Villanueva says he plans to file a new bill creating the Bulacan Airport City Special Economic Zone north of Metro Manila to address issues raised by President Bongbong Marcos. The president vetoed the bill passed by the previous Congress, citing provisions that, quote, pose substantial fiscal risks to the country and its lack of coherence with existing laws and regulations. In particular, he said the bill lacked audit provisions for the Commission on Audit. It also did not specify a master plan setting the proposed eco-zones boundaries. In a statement, Villanueva said the Senate will work with the executive to come up with a better version, even as a counterpart bill will be filed in the House soon.
My father is in full support of creating an economic zone in the area, but there were shortcomings in the bills that were filed in the upper and lower houses, which of course ES-Vic was right to point out. So I believe there is already a alternative bill that will be filed in this coming Congress that will hopefully address the shortcomings that resulted in the bill being vetoed in the first place.
The proposed eco-zone is near the 740 billion peso airport planned by San Miguel Corporation. Presidential spokesperson Trixie Cruz Angeles says the veto will not impact the airport construction.
We understand their feelings of disappointment, but this is the stand of the president. Let's fix this now, so that we don't wait for it to be challenged later on.
Bill sponsor Senator Amy Marcos urges the economic team to have a clear policy on the creation of new eco-zones. She also calls for the convening of the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council to guide lawmakers in drafting the remedial bill. Albay Congressman Joey Salceda says safeguards will be put in place to address the president's concerns about the eco-zone. Cian Arcangel, CNN, Philippines.
SMC President and CEO Ramon Ang says he's also open to working with the government to improve the proposal. Ang notes the country could raise up to $200 billion in export revenues from potential foreign investors yearly through the Bulacan Airport Ecozone. Senators are reviving a number of controversial bills in the 19th Congress. Senator Coco Pimentel files a measure automatically suspending the value-added tax and excise tax on fuel when the price of Dubai crude oil breaches $80 per barrel, while Senator Amy Marcos wants the president to have the power to suspend the VAT on petroleum products. Opposition Senator Risa Ontiveros renews her push for the divorce bill and the Sochi Equality Bill, banning discrimination based on a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Ending illegal contractualization is a priority for both Ontiveros and Senator Joel Villanueva. Villanueva also proposes a 100 billion peso stimulus fund for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Senator Bongo, meanwhile, wants to restart discussions on the Disaster Resilience Department, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Virology Institute. A number of senators have filed their top 10 bills, starting with most senior member Lauren de Garda, who is seeking better education for public school students. More stories after a quick break. Pinoy stars gush over Heart Evangelista crossing paths with his K-drama icon. Plus, a historic milestone for Nayon of Twice and her debut album. Details straight ahead on CNN Philippines.
Beyond bringing power to all, we're taking steps to produce and deliver Earth-friendly energy today and for our children's tomorrow. Powering the good life. Meralco.
Totoo bang number 1 sa kids ang tender juicy? Patunayan po natin. Pinaka-tender ba talaga ang TJ? Talaga! Wow. Pinaka-juicy? Truly! Pinaka-masarap? The best! Wow! No more questions, Your Honor. Sige nga. Ubus na po eh. Walang duda! Kids can tell. Pinaka-tender, pinaka-juicy, at pinaka-masarap. Number 1 na tender juicy. May cheese dog at chicken dog pa.
Walang duda. Kids can tell. Number 1 ang Pure Foods Tender Juicy.
After more than 2 years of pandemic disruptions, we are back to celebrate World Gin Day. Our World Gin Day celebration consists of a month-long activities highlighting highlighted by a media launch on June 10 to kick off the nationwide Gin Bar Crawl Challenge that starts on June 11. And tonight, as we kick off our World Gin Day celebration, the country's top professional mixologists will take center stage to craft one-of-a-kind cocktails based on Ginebra San Miguel gin products.
Actually, for us mixologists, it is highly adaptable, uniquely versatile, and it takes on many different strengths, flavors, and nuances.
Gin's clear, pure quality is derived from a rigorous distillation process that brings out the best flavors. Gin is in. So let's drink, enjoy, and let the celebrations be gin.
You're watching Newsnight. For the sixth time this year, Pinoy pole vaulter EJ Obiena brings home the gold. The 26-year-old topped the jump and fly meet in Germany on Sunday, Philippine time, clearing 5.80 meters in his third attempt. Obiena also ruled the tournament last year, jumping 5.85 meters. And here at home, Gilas Pilipinas closes out the third window of the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers with a victory. The squad conquered India 79-63 on Sunday at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay. Dwight Ramos led the team with 21 points, a massive improvement from his 6 points in a match versus New Zealand last week, which Gilas lost. The athlete told CNN Philippine Sports Desk what may have led to the turnaround.
Honestly, I was more focused on defense. I had a hard time playing against New Zealand, and because of their defense, and I just wanted to focus and sort of play the sort of type of defense that they were playing against me. So I'm just trying to improve on that.
Gilas has a 2-2 record in Group A, both wins at the expense of the Indian team. Regardless of results, the Philippine team is competing in the World Cup since it is one of the host countries. Making headlines in entertainment, fashion icon Heart Evangelista meets Korean actress Song Hye-kyo in Paris, France. The two attended a gala for a luxury jewelry brand over the weekend. Pinoy celebrities, some of them fans of the Descendants of the Sun star, left comments celebrating the meetup. Coincidentally, both Hart and Hye-kyo portrayed the character Jessie in the Korean and Philippine adaptations of Full House. And trending today was the phrase Nayeon making history, with the Twice singer becoming the first K-pop soloist to have her album chart in the U.S. top 10. Her first solo record, Im Nayeon, debuted at number 7 on the Billboard 200. This also became the top-selling album of the week with 52,000 copies sold. Nayeon is the first member of the girl group Twice to release a solo record. The latest installment in the Despicable Me franchise inspired a viral trend on TikTok, with American teenagers dressed in suits flocking to cinemas to watch the movie. The challenge has gotten so big that film distributor Universal Pictures has tweeted about loving the trend. CNN's Rick Damigella gives us a look at the movie driving the challenge, now showing in local cinemas.
Did you just trade my future for a pet rock? See?
Hide your bananas, the Minions are back in Minions: The Rise of Gru.
You seriously think a puny little child can be a villain? Yes, I am pretty despicable. You don't want to cross me?
Steve Carell reprises his role as the Despicable Gru at the age of 12.
I just tried to kind of sound like Gru on helium a little bit, and just tried to pinch it a little bit and get it up an octave or so.
No, guys, come on. Hey, I've got the image to uphold here.
I think the bigger challenge was to try to make him actually seem like he was younger. You know, there's a certain earnestness to him and a wide-eyed nature that I was trying to imbue with that voice.
Tomorrow is the biggest day of my life. Watch out, world. Here comes Gru!
What are Carell's thoughts on the Minions' enduring popularity?
They're sweet. You know, they're very kind. They're very human, ironically, for an animated movie. But there's a lot of love, and I think they're funny. The Minions are the Three Stooges. You know, they're the Marx Brothers, so they have all of this physical comedy that's really funny. They're so well crafted, and a lot of care goes into them too.
Hello, Peanut?
Oh, yes, please.
Peanut.
In Minionwood, I'm Rick Damagella.
And that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program is brought to you by
RPN Radio Philippines Network. DXTV Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Aging is a part of life and something that should be looked forward to. And for women, part of the big change they have to go through in their 40s or their 50s is menopause. In this episode, we'll better understand this natural biological process and what lies beyond menopause. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Let's welcome our guests who will empower us with better understanding on menopause and what women really go through during this natural bodily process. With us is Dr. Angela Aguilar. She's an OB-gynecologist from the Medical City and a faculty of the Division of Reproductive Endocrinology and Infertility at the UPPGH, as well as the past president of the Philippine Society for Reproductive Medicine. We also have Dr. Eileen Cynthia De Lara, who is a cardiologist from the University of Santo Tomas Hospital. Thank you both for joining us on this program. Now, Dr. Angela, let's get straight to the topic. Please describe for our viewers what menopause is.
It's very important that we make sure that the women who are going through this phase, they're able to define what menopause means. Menopause is the cessation of menstruation for about a year. It's not yet over if you have intermittent menstruations or periods that occur infrequently. You have to wait for a year before that event occurs. That said, menopause can be a big transition for many women, lasting in a period of 1 to 2 years prior to the last period and extending 1 to 2 years after the final menstrual period. So the transition is called perimenopause, and the symptoms are found or usually experienced during that time.
So in this episode, we'll be talking about the physical changes, but I'd also like to touch on, Dr. Eileen, some of the sociological, maybe even psychological dimensions to it, because there's a lot of connotations maybe attached to the word menopause. Could you talk a little bit about how menopause, in that respect, it is a natural process, but it also affects a lot of the person's social surroundings, their relationships, most especially their self-esteem?
When you talk about menopause, women actually can't really detect whether this is really menopause or they have cardiac condition, no? Because majority of women presenting with symptoms of menopause can also mimic symptoms of cardiovascular disease. That's why it's very important really to educate them about this period, of not actually menopause itself, but the perimenopausal period. And that is when all of these manifestations of symptoms starts to happen. One perfect example is what is known as the vasomotor symptoms. So when you talk about that, this is basically same symptoms that patients with cardiovascular disease would probably complain. They have palpitations and they always think that it's cardiovascular, not actually thinking that maybe part and parcel of their perimenopausal period. So other symptoms such as, easy fatigability, they easily sweat, sleep disturbances. These are very, very common symptoms that women would actually complain. And if you don't talk about menopause in that particular line, they might mistake it as, a cardiovascular disease. And most often than not, these patients will really come to a cardiologist, not to an OB. So I think that's a very important impact, in the lives of women when you talk about menopause.
I think that's a very important point you put up there, Dr. Eileen, because it's the identification of these symptoms that is best for that person undergoing this journey. Now, with that being said, Dr. Angela, let's talk about the start, because there are 3 phases of menopause. But before we discuss that, what we want to be able to give information is for that woman to identify that she is undergoing this. Before that though, is there an age? Is there a hard and fast rule at this age? Magkakaroon ka na ng first stage of perimenopause?
Changes in menopause, the symptoms can occur 1 to 2 years before the actual cessation of her periods. And that is why, because the woman is not aware that these are attached to menopause, they really attribute it to a cardiovascular pathology or a condition. And they only see us when their periods completely stops or it becomes irregular. Now, when do these changes occur? Nowadays, we do see women in their 50, 51, 52. Only by then are they experiencing these menopausal symptoms and changes.
Now, let's go to the different stages, and let's start with the perimenopause symptoms. A lot of these are pretty significant. Trouble sleeping, mood changes, weight gain, dry skin, hair loss, changes in body temperature, irregular periods. On paper, all of these symptoms happening to any person would make them feel overwhelmed at what they're feeling. Do all of these symptoms happen all at once, Dr. Angela, or do we see a gradual progression?
A different experience for one woman to another, and earlier changes would mean that the patient would experience the vasomotor symptoms, as Dr. Eileen had placed. The hot flashes are one of the more important symptoms that should be recognized early. Number 2, the irregularities in periods happen in the middle of the transition. And the last of these changes are the urogenital symptoms, the vaginal dryness, and they will have sometimes urinary symptoms like dribbling or painful urination, even painful intercourse or sexual intercourse.
Dr. Eileen, you mentioned earlier there's some significant amount of women who may think they have one condition when it is menopause. What are some of the conditions that can be mistaken for perimenopausal symptoms?
All right. So as a cardiologist, most of patients coming in with palpitations would always think that they have a cardiovascular condition. One may be a valvular heart condition, coronary artery disease, along with, of course, some endocrinologic conditions. Thyroid is one of the most common associated disease, with palpitation, easy fatigability, or they easily get tired, as part and parcel of the, differential diagnosis that you have to consider, in a patient or in a woman presenting with all of these symptoms. So they really don't know what's wrong with them, and they ended up going to a cardiologist who would initially diagnose them as somebody who has a heart condition. So lalo sila nagkakaroon ng sleep disturbances, But actually, it's a way, at this particular time that we have to inform our audience, especially the women, that in that particular age, it is not always cardiovascular disease, We have to think of perimenopause as a stage, that they are really going through.
When we return, we'll take a closer look at the stigma and misconceptions that are often linked with menopause. We're your connection to better health. This is MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Dr. Angela, you mentioned earlier how women nowadays are undergoing menopause at a later age, sometimes in their 50s. Now, do you see an increase in unplanned pregnancies where the woman is becoming fertile or is still fertile or getting pregnant in their late 40s or even early 50s?
Certainly, every woman who is still ovulating have a chance at getting pregnant. And that is a concern because one, whether she wants to still be fertile or wants to add or start a family at that age needs to be evaluated, because we are not as fertile at that age because one, our ovulation may come far and few in between. Number two, the quality of our eggs at that stage will not be likely to result in a live birth. So if we want to avoid pregnancy that is unexpected, certainly we have to be aware that we still have a risk or a chance at getting pregnant.
For those who do want to have a baby in their late 40s or even early 50s, what are some advice that you can give them? Is this something that is possible for them? Is this healthy for them?
Well, it's very difficult to get pregnant after the age of 40, but we do have evaluation of these women. We check for their anti-Mullerian hormone to check for ovarian reserve, and that will give us a very accurate prognosis as to their chance of conceiving. On the other hand, you're talking about whether is it safe for them, and that will really depend on how healthy they are, and that is where we collaborate with our colleagues like Dr. Eileen, the cardiovascular specialist, because this is a quite neglected aspect for women. They may be very busy focusing on their careers, but they neglect their health risks. And this has to be evaluated to be able to assess whether the woman is healthy enough to carry a pregnancy to term.
Definitely. So reminder to our viewers, if you have any questions with regards to your plans for the future of having a family or whatnot, it's always good to have a healthy talk with your OB gynecologist, with your internist, even with your cardiologist. Now, Dr. Eileen, I'd like to ask, a lot of women, this is an important topic, but it seems it doesn't get talked about enough, even amongst women. So my question for you is, what seems to drive that stigma and women not being so comfortable with the thought of them approaching menopause?
Of course, when you talk about menopause, women would always think that I'm nearing a chronic disease. That's why they sometimes try to put it on the side, not think about it, no? But I guess what we have to do right now is really embrace that this is a stage in a woman's life that would really come and eventually will pass. And it's really our responsibility to take care of it, no? Eventually preventing, no, all of these chronic diseases to set in. No? That's why it's very important that we really have to encourage women who are already in the perimenopause, also in menopause, to check with an internist or a cardiologist to make sure, no, that all of these risk factors will be addressed early on.
That being said, Dr. Eileen, let's touch on the complications once a woman reaches that stage of menopause. Let's start first with hypertension. Please talk about this a little bit more. How can they manage this effectively? When can they expect all these changes to be significant?
All right, so when you talk about menopause, of course, there is a hormone there, no, that somehow serves as a protective hormone for women against these chronic diseases. But once you develop menopause, no, you have now withdrawal of these hormones. These are your estrogen and progesterone, which somehow helps a woman, no, against all of these chronic diseases. Of course, early on, as I've said, we really have to encourage all of these women to have a healthy lifestyle. No? Start early. Because most often than not, no, women actually forget all of these things because they think they are still not on that vulnerable stage, no, in their life. But of course, when you have in this stage of peri and then eventually menopause, you are now starting to go to this very vulnerable stage. No? That's why early on, do your lifestyle modification.
Now, Dr. Angela, let's talk about weight gain. This is one of the issues which a lot of women think are inevitable. Can you talk a little bit about the reason for the weight gain? And is there still a way to manage or still be at that ideal healthy weight?
Thank you for that. Interestingly, this generation that's entering their 40s and even their 50s and going into menopause are by far healthier than women 10, 20 years ago. Many women are now very aware of their health and they are aware about their lifestyle. But that said, long-term impact on poor diet and poor physical activity will take its toll. But we really have to make sure that when we enter this phase, our long-term lifestyle will be good enough so that we can minimize the impact of hormone withdrawal in this phase so that medically or physically we are healthy and able to cope with the changes that we are facing with menopause.
When we return, we'll provide some tips on how you can be ready for menopause. We'll be right back on Med Talk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is Med Talk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. While menopause is part of the journey for many women, some lifestyle choices can be triggers for menopause. For example, if a woman is a frequent chronic smoker, they are more likely to experience menopause earlier than a woman who doesn't smoke at all. So as a result, some women can actually experience menopause at an earlier age. Dr. Angela, let's talk about that. Can you share some insights on this notion, how certain lifestyles can affect the occurrence of menopause?
Menopause is actually dictated by genetics. So how old your mother had her menopause will likely be the age that you will enter menopause as well. But that said, smoking makes you have an earlier menopause, and chronic smoking puts you at particular risk.
Now, Dr. Eileen, my question for you is, how does alcohol intake affect perimenopause or menopause?
Generally speaking, there is not much study looking at direct association of alcohol with menopause. With regards to cardiovascular disease, of course, it's not only, again, looking at its direct effect, but concomitant with smoking, concomitant with obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, all of these things are all triggers for the development of atherosclerosis. So it's not just hypertension alone, but the atherosclerosis process.
Now, Dr. Eileen, a lot of women may feel anxious or even depressed once they reach that phase that they are approaching menopause, which is entirely normal. But what advice can you give to those who may fall into that stage and may have difficulty trying to cope with it?
I think the most important advice I would give them is probably embrace that this is part and parcel of a woman's journey. So it's better to have someone to really confirm what you are experiencing. So, and that would be, consulting with your physician.
Okay. Now, menopause may feel uncomfortable for a lot of women, but that doesn't mean it has to be an unpleasant experience. Dr. Angela, what kind of advice can you give in order for women to prepare for changes linked to menopause?
Dr. Eileen put it beautifully, the word embrace, because insight is helpful in making you less alarmed at the symptoms. So when you're prepared, you understand what's happening to your body and you're able to manage and be aware of the changes it's undergoing, number one. Number two, make sure your diet and lifestyle will put you in a healthy baseline, because menopause plus if you're in poor health certainly adds up and makes the experience very difficult for a woman trying to cope with all these changes. Last but not the least, when you have these changes, you really have to remember us, your physician, because there are annual available methods that we can do to check your health. You need a health check at this point. So all of these help us prepare, manage, cope, and minimize the impact of menopause on our health and as well as our lifestyle.
Dr. Angela, are there support groups for those who are going through menopause? Is this something that could help ease that load, ease that anxiety, for one thing, being together with people who are undergoing the same journey?
Well, in hospitals, there are menopause clinics, and they organize many activities that will help women cope with this menopause, educate these women, provide medical care to these women, and provide socialization for these women, because peer affirmation and support is really very helpful.
Now, Dr. Eileen, in terms of the heart again, a lot of women may be wondering, are there some things that are absolutely better that they shrug off altogether? Things like we talked about smoking, we talked about alcohol. What about caffeine? Is caffeine something that should be limited once someone undergoes menopause?
Definitely, we all know that excessive caffeine will actually mimic palpitation as what we see in patients who are in their perimenopause and eventually into menopause. So that's one thing that we really have to advise our patient to lessen their caffeine intake. Not just caffeine, but food that are rich with caffeine, like for example, chocolates, sodas, So they have some form of components of caffeine, and that could add up to the symptom of your vasomotor symptoms, is what you see in patients with perimenopause and eventually menopause.
I hope our viewers gained a lot of advice from the two of you. But before we go, of course, we are going to give them even more advice. Any final words? I'll start with Dr. Eileen.
For women, of course, this is not only for women, but all of us, make sure that we have a healthy lifestyle early on in our lives. As what we have been discussing, eventually it will create a big impact in that particular phase that we're going through, and that is perimenopause. So start with a healthy diet. Start moving around. Have yourself checked.
Yes, definitely. And Dr. Angela, final words from you.
Arm ourselves with knowledge. Better knowledge will help us cope with the changes our body will have. Access health care. Don't be afraid. Don't wait until the last moment when you have really bad symptoms, because preventive medicine is best. And to prevent that, we need to have better advice, fit a lifestyle, and a healthy diet to cope with it.
And with that, thank you very much, Dr. Angela Aguilar and Dr. Aileen Cynthia De Lara, for being with us today and sharing your knowledge on menopause. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.